Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. This one's a little different, gentler, more emotional, but no less powerful. Tien thinks she might be pregnant, and while that news alone would be enough to turn any couple's world upside down, she's also facing intense pressure from someone very important in Jack's life, his mother. Not everyone believes in love at first sight. Fewer believe in love that can survive uncertainty. But today, we're going to witness what happens when love gets tested, not by lies or betrayal, but by fear, family, and the unknown. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next episodes. Jack stood quietly beside the open trunk of his car, a small box of picnic supplies resting inside. There were blankets folded neatly, a small bag of snacks, even a lightweight stove. Everything had been planned for a simple day away from everything. But Jack? He wasn't thinking about sandwiches or hiking trails. His thoughts were miles away. A shadow seemed to hang over him, one that had nothing to do with the overcast sky or the trees above, and everything to do with the words his mother had spoken to him just the night before. "Are you out of your mind?" she had snapped, disbelief and anger fighting for space in her voice. "You're in love with a woman who could be pregnant, with a child that might not even be yours?" Those words haunted him, following him like a chill down his spine. And yet, standing across from him was Tien, calm as always, her hands gently folded, her gaze soft. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't tried to defend herself with anger or tears, but the pain in her eyes was undeniable. She understood. She really did. It wasn't unreasonable for a mother to want to protect her son, but that didn't mean she had to be okay with being doubted, or worse, rejected based on assumptions. Jack felt torn. It wasn't Tien's heart he questioned. He trusted her completely. But the situation? It was murky, unclear, a fog of possibilities and what-ifs. He didn't fear being betrayed. What gnawed at him was the uncertainty. Everything felt so fragile, like one wrong word or one false move could break the entire connection they'd built. And so, instead of sitting in silence and letting it eat them alive, they made a choice. A rare, brave, and beautifully mutual choice to find the truth. Jack had already booked an appointment with the clinic. And Tien, she didn't flinch. She didn't argue or act insulted. She just nodded and said, "Let's go," because she needed clarity just as much as he did. For the first time, their decision wasn't driven by impulse or emotion, but by the need for honesty and proof. That morning, as they drove to the clinic, the silence inside the car wasn't uncomfortable. It was purposeful. It was the silence of two people preparing for something big, like soldiers bracing before battle. Not a battle against each other, but against doubt, against fear, against a world that didn't believe in quiet, honest love. The drive was long. Neither of them talked much. But when they finally arrived at the clinic, the sterile, clean environment was a stark contrast to the open air they'd just driven through. Tien sat on the edge of the exam table, her posture composed, but her eyes betraying a flicker of worry. Jack stood next to her, arms crossed, gaze locked on the door as they waited for the doctor to come in. His heart was pounding. He didn't want to doubt her. He wanted this moment to prove everyone, including himself, wrong. The doctor entered with a calm demeanor, offering a polite nod before reviewing the chart. The sound of machines and quiet typing filled the room. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to keep both Jack and Tien on edge. The doctor asked her to explain what she'd been feeling, and for a moment, Tien hesitated. Then slowly, she began to speak. She described the dizziness, the waves of nausea, the way her chest sometimes felt tight, heavy. And even though she was scared of the possibility that she might be pregnant, she also admitted she wasn't entirely sure. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was stress. Maybe something medical. She didn't know, and that, more than anything, was why she was here. The doctor nodded thoughtfully, Then began the physical exam. Time slowed to a crawl. Jack felt his hands sweat. Tien kept her eyes on the ceiling. And then, finally, the doctor turned to them, his voice steady but kind. "You're not pregnant," he said. "Your symptoms are likely related to low blood pressure or circulatory issues. Nothing to be alarmed about. But no, you are not expecting a child." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, like a switch had flipped, relief washed over both of them. Jack let out a quiet breath, one he hadn't even realized he'd been holding. He turned to Tien, his expression softening. "I kind of thought it might be something else," he said, "but I had to be sure. I needed to know." Tien smiled, small and real, like a weight had been lifted. "I understand," she said. "So did I." As they walked out of the clinic, the space between them felt warmer, lighter. They weren't skipping or cheering, but they weren't heavy with doubt anymore either. What had started as a moment of panic had become one of deep understanding. The trust between them didn't just survive, it grew. Later that day, they decided not to go home immediately. Instead, they drove out to the forest, to a quiet clearing Jack had visited once as a teenager. It was peaceful, untouched, and far away from everything. For Tien, it was her first time being surrounded by nature like this. She took slow steps along the mossy path, her eyes wide with wonder. The further they walked, the more her worries seemed to melt into the trees. Jack smiled as he led the way, carrying a small bag of firewood over his shoulder. Every now and then, Tien reached out to help, and their hands would brush. It wasn't dramatic. It was easy, natural. They didn't need to talk much. Their silence spoke volumes. When they finally found a small patch of soft earth surrounded by trees, Jack looked around and asked, "What do you think? This spot okay?" Tien looked around, then smiled. "It's perfect." They started setting up. Jack gathered stones for a fire pit, and Tien unpacked their bag, neatly arranging the snacks and utensils. The simplicity of it all, the calm air, the dappled sunlight, the soft breeze, made the moment feel more special than anything expensive or flashy ever could. Jack started arranging the firewood, determined to start a fire by hand. He had watched enough survival videos, and now he wanted to prove that he could do it too. Tien sat nearby, watching him closely, curiosity in her eyes. She hadn't seen this method before, and part of her hoped he'd succeed, but another part quietly doubted it. Jack worked hard, rubbing sticks together until sweat dripped from his forehead. But the wood refused to catch fire. Tien didn't say anything. She just watched, silently encouraging. She knew he wanted to prove himself, but she also knew this wasn't an easy task. After a long few minutes, Jack sighed in frustration, clearly exhausted. Tien leaned in and asked gently, "Want to use the lighter?" Jack paused, then met her eyes and laughed. "Yeah, okay, let's do that." They lit the fire together, sharing a soft laugh as the flames finally danced to life. And in that moment, as the fire warmed their skin and lit up the forest, it felt like something in their hearts had ignited too. Not a spark of doubt, but a steady glow of something stronger than fear. Trust. The fire crackled steadily in the quiet forest, casting soft golden light across the clearing. Jack and Tien sat side by side, their knees nearly touching, and for the first time in what felt like days, there was no tension in the air. No unspoken questions. Just stillness. Peace. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. The kind that only happens when two people finally exhale after holding their breath for too long. They didn't say much at first. The fire did the talking. Its rhythm, the crackling, the faint pops of sap burning, everything about it was calming. A perfect backdrop to the moment they were now sharing. Jack stared into the flames, his eyes reflective, unfocused. There was something on his mind. Tien sensed it without needing him to say a word. She waited patiently, not pushing him to talk. And finally, Jack broke the silence. "My mom still doesn't trust you," he said, voice low, like it was hard to admit. She thinks I'm being reckless, being with someone who might have been pregnant with someone else's baby." He paused, letting the weight of the sentence land. "She doesn't understand what I see in you. And honestly, I don't think she's trying to. She's scared." Tien didn't flinch. She didn't get angry. She simply looked at him, her gaze calm but heavy with emotion. "I get it," she said softly. "If I had a son, I'd probably be protective too. I don't blame her. But it still hurts. Because I've only ever been honest with you." Jack nodded slowly. I know you have. And I hate that you can't see that." He reached for her hand and held it gently. "But I see it. I see you." Tien swallowed hard, blinking back the emotion building in her chest. "Sometimes I wish I had the right words to prove to her that I love you, that I would never lie to you." "You don't have to prove anything," Jack said firmly. "Not to her, not even to me. I trust you. I love you for who you are. And that's more than enough." They sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't awkward or heavy. It was peaceful, healing, the kind of silence that happens when two hearts are in sync, when words would only interrupt what they're already saying without speaking. The flames danced between them, casting shadows and warmth. The breeze picked up slightly, rustling the branches above, and Jack leaned over to grab a few more sticks to feed the fire. Tien stood up too, brushing the dirt off her jeans, and helped him arrange the wood. They worked in sync. No need for instructions or planning. They just moved together naturally. Jack pulled out a small skewer from his backpack and began threading sausages onto it. Tien watched with a smile, adding more kindling to keep the fire strong. The earthy scent of smoke, the soft chirping of birds overhead, and the aroma of food slowly cooking. It all blended into something magical. As the sausages began to sizzle, Tien grinned and said, "We might be making the best meal in the entire forest right now." Jack chuckled. "I mean, it's not five-star cuisine, but I'll take it." She looked at him, the firelight reflecting in her eyes. "It's simple, but it feels perfect. Like this moment, I want to remember this." Jack glanced at her, smiling gently. "Me too. It's strange, isn't it? How just sitting in the woods with you, cooking over a fire, feels more right than anything else right now?" She nodded, and for a second, they both looked around. The forest, the fire, each other, and everything just made sense. Once the food was ready, they sat down on a blanket Jack had laid out earlier. The forest wrapped around them like a cocoon, the wind whispering through the trees, birds occasionally calling from above. There was a sense of being completely cut off from the rest of the world. No phones, no expectations, just the two of them, a fire, and something hot to eat. Jack handed Tien a sausage on a paper towel, and she accepted it with a soft smile. "Thanks," she said. "Not just for this, for everything." "I'm really glad you're here with me," Jack said, his tone sincere. "I don't care what anyone else thinks. This is what feels real." Tien took a bite, then laughed. "Okay, this is actually way better than I thought it'd be. Right?" Jack grinned. "Survival food, but gourmet." They ate slowly, not rushing, letting the moment soak in. There was something about eating outside that made everything taste better. The simplicity, the effort it took to make it, it gave the meal meaning. It wasn't just food. It was a shared experience, a memory being made. After they finished eating, Jack put out the fire carefully, pouring a bit of water over the coals and watching the smoke rise. It was getting late, and the sky above the trees had started to shift to soft purples and oranges. They packed up in silence, not out of discomfort, but because neither of them wanted to break the peace that had settled over them. As they drove back toward town, the sun dipped below the horizon. The car was filled with that same comfortable quiet from earlier, but this time there was no fear, just a soft, lingering sense of calm. Jack reached over and placed a hand gently on Tien's knee. She looked over, smiled faintly, then turned her gaze back to the window. But she couldn't help it. Her mind started spinning again. Jack's mom. The comments. The doubts. Even with the relief from the doctor's visit, the future still held uncertainties. What if Jack's mom never accepted her? What if this tension never went away? Jack sensed the shift in her energy. "I have a meeting tonight," he said quietly, almost reluctantly. "Something came up at work." She nodded. "It's okay. You don't need to explain. I get it. I wish we had more time today." "I do too," she admitted. But this was enough. More than enough. When they reached her place, he walked her to the door. She turned to face him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jack leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Call me later?" She nodded. "I will." Once inside, Tien fed her pets, changed into something more comfortable, and settled into her chair. But her thoughts kept drifting. She thought about the clinic, about the fire, about the way Jack had looked at her when he said, "I trust you." That sentence, more than anything, played on repeat in her mind. Her phone rang. It was Jack. She picked up instantly. "Good night, my love," he said, voice warm, quiet, full of affection. She smiled, heart lifting. "Good night. I love you." As the call ended, she leaned back, letting out a long breath. It had been an emotional day, a hard one, but somehow they had made it through. Together, stronger. Whatever came next, she knew this. They could face it, because they had something rare